All right, join me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good buddy Chris Faraone. Chris is an independent journalist and news editor at Dig Boston, which you can find at digboston.com. He's the author of several books, including His Honoroo, I Killed Andrew Breitbart, 99 Nights with the 99%, all of which you can find at facebook.com/OccupyBook. You can find him on Twitter at Faraone. Chris, thank you so much for being on the show again.
My favorite. How's it going?
It's going good, buddy. So, Chris, you actually have a new in-depth investigative study up at Dig Boston on charter schools, and even more so, charter school operators here in Massachusetts. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the culmination of a lot of work I've been doing on charter schools and privatization, and mostly in Massachusetts. But schools are a tough thing to cover in different places because there's so much minutiae and state to state. But yeah, so this is about how I really open up by saying that it's not the debate that we're always hearing about in Massachusetts, at least, is whether there should be more charter schools, whether they should lift something called the cap, which puts a cap on the number that of schools that operate outside of the jurisdiction of their respective districts across the state. This whole piece argues that that argument doesn't matter. Charter operators, which are these third-party nonprofits for the most part, they that are funded and run by, as far as the boards of directors, boards of trustees, by some local players that we've all heard of, all your big banking people. So they're at the top of the food chain. Right below them are these charter operators. Mm-hmm. And these charter operators are actually been given control of public schools. So when we hear about charter schools, they have those too, but they're actually also inside running what we know as traditional public schools. But my article pretty much reveals that, they're only public school, in name only.
So these charter school operators, they've actually they've ignored this theoretical cap that was in place, and they've like a virus going in through the bloodstream. They figured out ways and actually gotten their claws around all types of Boston public schools.
Yeah, and my article really shows that this is it's so crazy to even say, but it's really let's say from the mid '80s on. So this has all been very insidious and happened since. Actually, it's Bank of America that started this one group called BPE. They used to be called the Boston Plan for Excellence. And they kind of just developed this really insidery relationship. There are people on the board of BPE. This is a third-party nonprofit that were also on the board of the Boston School Committee. The superintendent for a while of Boston Public Schools, she was on the board of BPE. And what happened is they end up getting these contracts. So they have federal contracts, they have state contracts, and they have city contracts. Right now, more than $1 million a year from the city. BPE, they train teachers, and in some cases, they operate schools. In one case, they do operate a charter school, the Dudley Neighborhood Street School. Now, the Dudley Street Neighborhood School. Now, on the other hand, they're taking over a school called the Dearborn. I've been following that, and it's kind of blown me away that the Dearborn is a public school, but this group, this third-party group, will be getting money against the wishes of many in the community to fund it starting next year, when they're going to have a brand new school building, I should say, by the way. Mm-hmm. And I know this is all very complicated, but I'm going to try to boil it down with a simple statement here. The public schools, the traditional ones, are basically getting choked for resources. We see this over and over, and it's not conspiracy theory. When you look at the line items on the budgets, which I know a lot of people don't like to do, especially reporters at the Boston Globe. When you look at them, the traditional public schools, which we're always hearing about how they're failing, they're choked. They don't have any of this extra special funding for this program or that funding. When you look at the public schools that have these charter operators in them, the ones that all of these, ed reform people, as they call themselves, love to brag are doing very well. Well, they have a lot of extra funding, because they have all these programs in there. In fact, they have more funding than we can even see in the budget, because they have funding coming into these programs from elsewhere. So basically, these third-party operators get to come in, set up their laboratories. Even if it's not a real charter school environment, they're getting there. And as far as the people who are running these things, the Boston Plan for Excellence, BPE, which I was talking about, it's about about 20% of their operating budget goes to just executive salaries. They had one guy making $205,000 a year. They had a board member who made about $500,000 just sitting on the board for a couple of years. So that's what's really going on. And I'm happy to say that this one kind of finally resonated. My phone's just ringing off the hook with more tips, and hoping there'll be some progress here.
Yeah, and what's interesting about it is, like, you mentioned that it's a lot of it is that a lot of this comes from Bank of America. Let's dig into, like, so how did these operators get these contracts? How I mean, obviously, like, again, this is they've tried to come at it from every possible angle. Like, who were the ones that let them in the door, I guess? Like, how did this actually come about?
So Boston Public Schools has had no real leadership for about 2 years now. They have an interim superintendent. His name is John McDonough. People like to say Don McDonough is a bean counter. He doesn't have kids. That doesn't mean he shouldn't be working in school. I'm not saying that, but it's just to give you kind of an idea of his mentality. He was asked at a forum last year by a kid who goes to a really pretty horrible school, would you send your kid to this school? And his answer was, I don't have kids. So it's not just me putting that, that's not me putting that in his mouth. But what I'm saying is, it's just, I don't have kids. Next question. I'm not kidding. That really happened. That was up to the Dearborn. That was one of the forums. So,
wow.
I think the kid was pretty blown away, to be honest. So was everybody.